Welcome to Coastal Conversations, the weekly podcast from Coastal Church, where we explore meaningful topics that shape our daily lives as followers of Christ. In Colossians 4:6, Paul encourages us to let our conversations be full of grace and seasoned with salt so that we can respond wisely to everyone. Through this podcast, we aim to live out that calling together. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you for tuning in today. We are so honored that you chose to listen to our podcast today. I have my friend and I'm not a therapist. She's a therapist, licensed marriage and family therapist, Jenni Starling, with us. She is also a repeat offender. She's been on the podcast twice, and we always get so many requests to have her back on. So when we have a topic like this one, I like to call Jenni and have her come in and share her expert advice with us. As you know, last Sunday, we started our new series called Find Your People. And Pastor Chad preached a wonderful sermon on the topic of loneliness and why we kind of need to break out of that and how we can break out of that and find community. And so we have the Find Your People party coming up May 18th on that Sunday, where we'll have so many groups for you to peruse through and find your people that Sunday that you can begin relationships with this summer, June and July. So you do not want to miss May 18th here at Coastal Church. It's going to be a pivotal Sunday. Well, I want you to help me welcome my guest today, Jenni Starling.
Hi, friend.
Hey. What about I said fellow? I was like, well, no, I haven't done the hard work of being a therapist.
Listen, you do other hard work that's equally as hard. So yes.
But I really appreciate you coming on today and helping us with this topic, because it really is, like we were talking about before we started, it's very broad.
Yes.
And it has so many facets. And I think what Pastor Chad did on Sunday was just like really brush the surface of so many levels of this that you're going to help us kind of explore and go into that we may not even realize is going on.
Yeah.
So let's get started. Do you think that loneliness has become as widespread in our society as we talked about on Sunday? And if so, why?
Yeah, I agree with Chad. I think he laid a really good foundation for what we're going to cover today. I think that obviously he laid so many statistics that I will echo today with, 21% of adults feeling lonely, kind of the top heavy hitters of what is leading to loneliness. I think everyone can agree the role that technology has played in disconnection. The tricky thing with technology is it can also form as a connector as well. And we can talk about what disconnects and what connects.
Yeah.
Not spending enough time with family is also high on the list. People working too much, just the culture of busyness that we're in also disconnects. And last but certainly not least, people struggling with mental health has played a role in loneliness.
You have here in your notes that loneliness affects the body, mind, and spirit. Let's talk about that and explore that a little bit. How does loneliness affect our body and our mind and our spirit? Because we are 3-part beings.
Absolutely.
And you deal with that in your therapy. You not only deal with the mind, you go there with the body and the spirit. And so that's what I appreciate about you. But how does loneliness affect those things?
Well, first, I think, my favorite thing to do in every podcast we do is let's get really clear about how we define things.
Yep.
Right? So let's define loneliness. So loneliness is being without company or cut off from others, which I thought was a very...
Yeah, that's a good definition.
A very good, clear definition. I think one thing that we need to think about when we think of loneliness is it a feeling or is it a cognitive craving? Right? When you're cut off from others, normally people that are experiencing loneliness, it's a craving. We have craving to maybe have a partner. We have a craving to have a friend.
Wow.
We have a craving to have more of a church home. But I do think it's also important to talk about what a lot of people frame up as loneliness could be isolation.
Talk about that a little bit.
Isolation is detachment from others, often involuntary. So isolation, let's go back to a few podcasts ago where we talked about boundaries, right? A lot of people form up isolation as a boundary because they're fearful. So a lot of times the fear of loneliness will lead to self-sabotaging because we are so fearful of being lonely. We will isolate ourselves. We will call it loneliness, but it's really armor because loneliness or being lonely is the thing that we fear the most.
Wow.
So when you want to talk about mind, body, spirit, if you really look at it that way, if you are isolating yourself and calling it loneliness, what impact do you think that has on your mind?
Yeah.
And to take that further, people who suffer from anxiety and depression are 80%. So that is most everyone that suffers from anxiety and depression has a fear of loneliness. So that allows us to really lean into exploring how we look at, not only how do we look at, how do we deal with loneliness?
So you have here in your notes, and we're sharing notes here, guys, because this is a lot. And we wanted to make sure that we did not like skip over things that really are important. So you just divided loneliness and isolation for us, because what you just said, help me reframe that. Isolation is a form of self-sabotaging when we think that we're lonely, but really we're not.
Right. And it can fear, because think about it, when we are isolated and we feel lonely, oftentimes if we're going to really be honest about what we're like, we're in that space. We're often looking at other people.
Okay.
We're on social media. We're like, we didn't get invited to that. I'm not getting invited to this. And that looks like a word that all of us like to avoid at all cost, which is rejection.
Yes.
And so isolation and rejection are, in my opinion, I like to say in my opinion, because there's other therapists that would get up here and could disagree, in my opinion, are best friends. They like to be together a lot.
Oh, wow. You say here that loneliness does not equal irrelevance. What does that mean?
Because a lot of times when you're responding, let's go back to response. When you're responding to something out of fear, typically that is not, what do you think that would look like from your end? Like if someone were to respond to someone in fear?
Maybe anger.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe offense.
Yeah.
Right. So that was typically, we'll echo that, correct. But when you respond to something in a curious way, maybe in a more compassionate way, going back to another podcast where we leaned into compassion a lot, what do you think a response would be?
Asking questions.
Exactly.
Thinking about like what Chad said on Sunday, like seeing it from their point of view, how they were raised, maybe. Yeah,
absolutely. And so when you think about loneliness does not equal irrelevance, to me, when you start hearing those words like rejection, irrelevance, I think you have to take a really compassionate look at yourself and ask yourself why. Why does me being irrelevant, or why does me possibly being rejected, why is it sending me to this place
of isolation?
Why?
Well,
why does it make me so uncomfortable that I'm willing to cut off everything to avoid it?
Wow.
And I think that's where a therapist will really lean into loneliness, maybe in a different way than anyone else will, because we're not going to help you avoid it. That's not what we do. We're actually going to lean into it and ask you to explore it. We're going to ask you to get really uncomfortable with it. We're going to ask you to really take the power away from it. You know, one of the things that Chad said in his sermon he said so many things that I agree with, but one of the things that he said is about loneliness as a feeling.
Yes.
And one of the things I love to say, and he said it just in his own way, is using loneliness as an indicator, not a dictator.
That's good.
And so many people use it as a dictator.
And they then again self-sabotage and they isolate, and then the cycle continues.
And I often wonder, because I'm just like you, I'm so curious about so many different things. And when I think about a topic like loneliness, I'm so curious about, I wonder what would happen to people if they viewed being able to tackle something like loneliness as a skill.
Talk about that.
Like, what would they do? You know, so because a lot of times when we look at loneliness or people that are struggling with loneliness, we like to tackle it like maybe we would attack depression or anxiety. And maybe that works. But maybe what could also work is viewing it as a skill, getting comfortable with maybe being alone more.
Wow.
Getting comfortable with being in your own thoughts. Getting comfortable with maybe going to the movies by yourself.
Because I think that you can be in a crowd and still feel lonely.
Absolutely. I think we've probably all experienced that, right? Like,
100%.
Maybe around the wrong people, but many reasons. But
and as an introvert, for myself, is sometimes the most lonely I feel is if I'm in a crowd, and I feel more myself if I'm, outside of a crowd. I know that we love to read Brene Brown, and I was reading one of her chapters on loneliness, getting ready for this series and doing some research and things like that coming up. And so she even mentioned the same thing, that she felt lonely in a crowd sometimes as an introvert. And when she would go on these book tours and things like that, she would call her husband and say, I feel so lonely. And I'm in all these crowds. And he would say, you need to go back to your hotel room and be by yourself. And she said, because it was not that I was by myself. It was not that I was feeling lonely. It was that's what fed me and helped me feel more like myself, was actually being alone. So we're not talking about loneliness as necessarily always by yourself, because you're thinking about it as more of a response. To something deeper going on, right?
Yes, because like anything, even if you're trying to tackle how to use coping skills around anxiety. Listen to the word I just said, coping skills. Navigating with a lot of conditions that make us uncomfortable, make us squirm in our skin, make us have that self-sabotage response. It is a skill. A lot of people don't want to hear that. They want us to have like this magic wand that says, come to therapy and think you're better, but it is a skill set. And I want to go back to something you said that we talked about a few minutes ago about the percentages that lead us possibly to loneliness. This busyness culture that we have.
Talk about that.
It has made us so uncomfortable with silence because we are always activated. We're activated on our phones. We're activated in public. So it makes almost noise normal and silence abnormal. So when we experience it, just like when we experience other things, we're looking around, we're like, oh, this doesn't feel comfortable. I'm not used to this, because we're used to like go, 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 go. In the silence, we think something's wrong. And again, if we lean into that example with curiosity and clarity, we can say, is it wrong? Why can't I just sit in silence and be okay with that? Is there something wrong with me? Or is it just something that is? It doesn't have to be good or bad. It just is. And I often wonder, if we tackled loneliness that way, would it have the power that it has
over us? That's so good.
Would it lose its power?
That's very helpful. What impact do you think that loneliness and isolation have on our spirit? Let's lean into that a little bit, because we talked a little bit about the mind, that it traps us in these cycles. The body, I mean, there's statistics out there. It literally saps your body. It saps you.
When I had a really great talk with a good friend of mine. We have morning talks every day. Her name is Kelly West. I told her, I'm like, I'm going to give you a shout out today because she's one of my—
Hi, Kelly.
She's one of my spiritual gurus, and we talk almost every day about things like this. And she gave me a really great book called The Bait of Satan.
John Bevere.
It's one of my favorite books about just how the enemy can use things like loneliness for a playground to wreck you.
Wow.
But if you lean into the spirit side of you, God can use the same thing to reveal things to you.
Wow.
And to bring you clarity. And I read a book recently.
And that goes, just to pause, that goes back to those indicator lights.
Yes.
It's like when those indicator lights go off in your loneliness, like Chad talked about on Sunday,
yes.
lean into that is what you're saying. Start asking questions.
And I think you have to have especially as a believer, you have, or you need to, I don't think you have to, but you need to have a self-awareness about what these things do to you.
That's
a lot of times we feel things and we just go with it. We're like, okay, I feel it. Let's just go with it. But I think if you operate with an element of wisdom and you operate with an element of just self-awareness, you can feel it and say, hold on, I don't know what this is. And until I know what this is, I'm going to pause. I'm going to pray. I'm going to lean into my spiritual life so then I can know the next steps. But oftentimes we feel it and we just go, oh, I don't like this isolation. I'm being rejected. I'm going to close myself off in my house.
Yeah. That's really good. And we can't, as Christ followers, let our feelings dictate to us, because then that's leading soul first instead of spirit man first. And I love that you said pause, like just practice the pause and ask the Holy Spirit to reveal to you, why am I feeling like this? Where is this coming from? Help me, like, give me spiritual eyes to see the why behind the what. And then maybe sometimes if we can't get to the bottom of it, seeing a counselor, seeing a godly therapist will help us kind of peel back those layers that could go back years that we haven't dealt with.
Absolutely. I read a book recently and I'm not going to get the name of it right, but I'll give it to you so you can put it in the show notes. But it was literally about why people disagree on religion and politics.
Oh, gosh.
It was by the person who wrote Anxious Generation. It was the same author. It was one of the, it's such a great, great book.
Yeah.
But one of the things that he says in the book, which has become my just quote of the year, is the closer we lean into understanding, the closer we can lean into compassion. And when we feel things, but when we feel things and don't understand it, then we judge it. Of course we do.
Yes.
Why wouldn't we? Because it feels awful. Let's just be honest.
Yes.
Like loneliness isn't something that feels great. So it feels awful. So I don't want to lean into that. I just want it to go away.
Yeah.
And so, we do all these things I just want it to go away, which doesn't make it better, which creates this fear mentality around this topic versus, again, like trying to understand it. Why am I here? Why do I feel lonely? Is it the people? Is it me? Maybe going to a therapist to explore that. I send patients all the time back to their pastors to help them answer questions like that, and their pastors send it back to me too.
Send them back to you.
We both do the work, but leaning in with understanding is going to allow you to have more compassion, not only for the feeling of loneliness and what it brings to your life, but also yourself.
Yeah.
And how you respond to it.
That's good. And I like that you said the closer we lean in to understanding, we lean into compassion, because many times when we isolate, we reject people because we don't think, like, we start judging them because we don't understand them. So we're like, I could never be friends with that person. And we judge based on what we see because we have not gotten to know them. We've not leaned in with questions. And like what Chad said on Sunday, we don't understand the backstory of who they are. And so we just say, I could never be friends with that person, instead of leaning in with questions, leaning in with compassion, so that we aren't, because not everybody that we are in relationship with and friends with are going to look like us, hopefully, or act like us, or respond like us.
In a healthy community,
hopefully,
they don't, right?
Hopefully there's some friction there. Iron sharpens iron, there's sparks, right?
Absolutely.
And so if you are constantly rejecting people because they don't think like you or act like you or look like you, you're gonna stay in loneliness, because you're not trying to understand them or lean in with compassion. And there could be a gold mine of a friendship there that we're rejecting because we're choosing not to see them through the eyes of compassion. I think that's really good.
Yeah. And anything that feels uncomfortable, and this is something clinically I see over and over and over again, is not being conditioned. I talk a lot about capacity, not being conditioned with capacity to withstand being uncomfortable. Like being uncomfortable has become this like thing that we avoid almost as much as we're avoiding loneliness. And it's
Do you think that's because we don't want to be vulnerable?
It could be. I take it back to a skill set. I mean, I think being uncomfortable is a skill set. I think it's something that needs to be taught more. I do think, not that I'm going to blame being, the lockdown for everything, but I do think research is coming out about the true damage that it did socially, mentally to all of us. And I think that's one of the ways that it really hurt our society, is just it limited our capacity to be able to travel through things that were really uncomfortable. We were just locked away from each other.
Go a little bit more into that uncomfortable, because you have some statistics here and really good points that I wanted to bring out. Our relationship with getting uncomfortable. So let's talk about that a little bit, because you have these really good points I don't want us to miss. On the ones that you talked about, the loneliness is lethal as smoking.
Yeah. So loneliness is lethal as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Loneliness may not only be the cause, but also interacts with anxiety and depression in a complex way. To go back to some other statistics we mentioned earlier, 81% of lonely adults reported to have anxiety or depression. And 75% of lonely adults, I hate this statistic, reported having little or no meaning or purpose. And when I wrote that down, I literally text you, next podcast, we have to talk about values.
Yeah. Yep.
So many people do not know what their values are. And I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because it'll take us away from this, but I do think it's an opportunity for another podcast to talk about how do values direct us in times of loneliness, in times of feeling uncomfortable. Our values should guide all that. And if you don't know what they are, you will feel lost.
That's really good.
You will feel lost.
How can we work through the feelings of loneliness now that we kind of are there?
Yes.
And so we have it. We see the indicator lights. We're asking the questions. So then what do we do? How do we work through these feelings?
So I am going to quote our favorite, Brene Brown, with two kind of tools. She has more, but these are the top two that I thought would help today. Is one thing that she calls develop grounded confidence. And what she says, it is not fear that gets in the way of courage, it's armor. I loved that.
That's really good. Is that like walls that we've put up?
Walls we put up. Again, it's leaning into understanding what your past is doing. Why are you isolating yourself? And she asked the question, what armor are we carrying that shields us from true connection? How do we self-protect when things get uncertain? and this just cues back into how we respond to rejection, right? Because if we see isolation and loneliness, if we see loneliness as an external problem, if we see it as a problem that only the church needs to fix, you will not be satisfied. Because there is not enough small groups. There is not enough people. There is not enough. It will never, as Shauna Nequist says, there is no there. There will be no there. It will never be enough. But if we see it as both possibly, maybe it is a church problem to solve. Yes, maybe that's true. But it is also an internal problem to solve too.
Yes.
That is, I think, where you're going to get the most satisfaction. And that's where that confidence will grow.
You say that one of the key takeaways is being committed to learning and improving through this.
Yes. When Kelly and I were talking this morning, she gave me an example of walking her dog, Scout, on a leash. She said, when we first started walking him, he just laid down.
I had a dog like that once.
He didn't go anywhere. She's like, no matter how much, I was like, come on, let's go.
Yeah.
He was like, not going to do it. Right. But the minute he became curious to like, oh, I wonder what's on the other side of that street, he got up and started walking.
Oh.
So there's got to be an element of us getting up and walking. The church can only provide so much.
Yeah.
But if you're not willing to get up and lean into learning and improving, then it's going to feel like you're being left behind.
Yeah.
So that's where it's got to be that dual relationship. It's got to be both the church has to provide it, but you have to be willing to get up and go.
Yeah. You got to be willing to take those steps.
Yeah.
So how can the church better understand the root to solve the problem? As the church, as Christ followers, as the body of Christ, how do we better understand so that we can help solve the problem? Like you said, it's a dual thing.
One of the things that really helps me, because I told you before we started, I think I prepared for this podcast more than I've prepared for any of them because it is such a broad topic. But one of the ways that helped me look at it is looking at it from a spirit mind versus a fleshly mind. And what I mean by that is it's just different language to what we've already talked about. When I look at it through a spirit mind, I'm looking at growth. I'm looking at it through wisdom.
Yes.
I'm looking at it through, maybe it is the church's responsibility, but maybe it's also my responsibility. When I'm looking at it through a fleshly mind, it's all about me.
Yeah.
It's just about me.
Self-centered.
Like, it's your job to make me not feel lonely.
Wow. Wow, that's really good. So you have to walk, you have to stand up, you have to do the work as well. What are some creative or unexpected ways you've seen people foster connection in community? So if they recognize this and they're like, okay, it's not about me, I have to begin to walk, I have to begin to take these steps. What are some creative ways you've seen them do that?
Yeah, one of the things that I want to say before we go to the action items is I want to give a message of hope and encouragement. I don't want it to be so like, you've got to go. And I know there's probably people listening that are like, I want to, but I can't. I want to give a message of hope to echo something that Chad said in his sermon about the wilderness.
Yes.
Sermons on the wilderness, quite frankly, are my favorite. I don't know why I'm drawn to wilderness talk so much, maybe because I help people walk through their own wildernesses.
Well, I think you walked through a very significant one for a couple years. Yeah.
For a good
I think
time.
It shaped you.
It did. But I want everyone to remember that a wilderness is something, to be traveled through.
That's right.
It is not a place you are supposed to build a home.
It
is not a place even to put an RV, right? Like, it is a place to be traveled through. So with that mindset, understanding that a feeling of loneliness, while it may feel permanent, it doesn't mean that it is.
Yeah.
And understanding the temporary nature of things like loneliness may help you travel through it.
Yeah, that's good.
It's not a permanent state. So let's go to things we can do. Listen, I'm a big kick of phone-free zones.
Phone-free zones.
I know that it's very difficult because we are all attached to our phones, myself included. I'm not speaking out of line. I'm also guilty of it.
Yeah.
But I do think the phones serve as a way to connect us, but I also do believe it serves as a weapon to disconnect us.
Yeah. Our son's school this year, they make all the kids, when they come in, put their phones in this cell phone locker at the office.
I love it.
They can't have phones all day.
I love it.
And the teachers have said the connection, the kids are talking face to face. They're talking to us face to face.
Yes.
That it has fostered more community and connection than ever before and the kids don't miss it. They're like, no, we actually like it. They haven't complained. So I know many schools are like, oh, I don't know how this is going to go, especially like the principals and stuff like that. But when they did it, it has been 100% across the board. People are just, it's worked.
I love it.
You're right.
More people should do it. And to go back to the armor conversation, I do believe a lot of people use devices as armor.
Oh, that's good.
They do.
That's true. Because I've been in a group and I'm like, I don't feel connected. And what do? I'll take my phone out. And I'll pretend like, sorry, I just got an email. I got to, answer this really quick, or I've got to,
Yeah.
Because I don't want to, I feel uncomfortable or awkward connecting with them, and I'll get really awkward, and I'm like, so I'll just take my phone out.
And this is where I always encourage people to, when you get that feeling of uncomfortableness, that's when you lean into your faith.
Yes. Okay. Talk about that, because I get awkward in big settings like that sometimes.
To me, that's where you lean into your faith. That's where you pause, you take a breath, you recognize, okay, I'm really, really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to walk to the restroom and just kind of collect myself and walk back out. Maybe I need to go outside and take a breath of fresh air, say a prayer, collect myself, gain my confidence, and walk back in. But that's when you tap into that. You tap into the awareness of, oh, this is what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
I'm not going to grab my phone like I normally would. I'm going to step outside, ground myself, walk back in, and engage.
Yeah. Have a conversation.
Yeah.
Yes. I think Chad's going to preach on that a little bit, of the art of a conversation, because we've lost it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think people value realness. And for some reason, we're scared of realness.
Yeah.
We feel like realness is what's going to breed rejection and more isolation. But go back to that craving.
Yeah.
I think people crave realness.
Yes. Colleen and I were talking the other day, and we were like, it's very refreshing when somebody's in a setting or a group setting and they're like, okay, this is just going to be awkward, and they just acknowledge the awkwardness in the room, or like, I feel awkward about this conversation, and they just acknowledge it. She's like, for some reason, it just takes the edge off of things.
Oh yeah.
And it helps the conversation get started, where it's like, oh, this is going to be messy at first, and we're going to have to like gain our footing in this conversation. But once you kind of get past it, then it helps open those doors.
Yeah. I mean, it opens up for you both to be human.
Yeah. And because we put those, like you said, that armor on first. So we got to let that down a little bit.
Got to let it down.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that I love that I tell parents, I tell everyone I see that they need to do more is play. Play is the ultimate connector.
Play. Okay.
It's the ultimate collector.
So what does that look like?
Connector. With kids, I tell parents all the time, if you are having trouble connecting with your child, go play with them. Go fishing.
Yeah.
Be silly.
Be crazy.
And it doesn't matter even if your kid is a teenager. They still want it.
Yeah.
Because that play builds trust. It's why I do play therapy.
Okay.
And parents will leave and they're like, well, you just played Uno.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but it's more than that. We talked the whole time.
Yeah.
I was able to see how they problem solved. I was able to see how they dealt with beating me.
Yeah.
Did they like throw it down and say, in your face? Or did they,
Right.
I got to see how they dealt with me beating them. And, it is the ultimate connector. I'm a huge advocate of play.
Yeah.
I think we need to play more. Even
That's
adults,
so
we need to be childlike.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing to watch.
Chad and Evan, because his games are like, the computer games, and we're like, we do not know what you're doing.
Yeah.
But he had a great thing that he started years ago. He would just go in Evan's room, in game room, and he has a couch in there, and he'll just sit beside proximity.
Yes.
He'll just sit beside him while he's playing the crazy games that he plays that we don't understand. But it's just proximity. And that has helped them connect, because he's trying to get in his world. He's watching what he's doing. He's talking to him about it, even though he's not physically like doing the thing.
I agree.
But it just has opened that door for them.
Yeah. You have to meet your kids where they are. I am literally in spring training with my son right now.
Okay.
And I do not play football. I don't know if I needed to tell you guys that, but I do not play football. But I am lifting weights with him. I am doing box jumps with him.
Yeah.
I am in the backyard throwing because I
think I saw you do that on Instagram the other day. That's so good.
Because it's a way that I can be with him. And he loves it. And so he loves to see me, try to jump as far as him and not be able to, and it's a connector for us, and it's silly, and we don't get everything right, but we're out there together and we're having a good time. And that's
so good. Yeah. So fun-free zones, the importance of play, and then service. You talked about service. How is that an unexpected way to foster connection and community?
Because your story can become your testimony. So when you're unsure of how to connect, my favorite way is just keep it simple.
That's good.
Start with what you know. You don't have to become something that you're not. Just step into what you know is true and then build on that.
That's good.
And the easiest place to do that is serving others.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. If people have a hard time meeting new people, like we talked about, maybe their armor is up or they feel a little awkward putting themselves out there, what advice would you give as a therapist?
I would get curious about your relationship with rejection and how you respond to it.
Mm-hmm.
I would get curious about also your response to things that are uncomfortable and explore it more as a skill set, more as than a deficit. How do we build the skill? I would also start behind the scenes. You don't have to go from nothing to everything.
Okay.
A happy place for most people is in the middle. So if you are more of an introvert, I'm not going to suggest you go from watching church online to being on the front row. Right. But maybe go from 0, which is home, to maybe just going and do that a while. And then maybe show people where to park, right? Or do things behind the scenes. You don't have to go from 0 to 10. Build on small things. Small habits lead to big change.
That's good.
And remember that circles are built one by one.
Okay.
I think we look at things online and we believe things that are true that are not true. Like most people have an enormous amount of circles.
Yeah.
When most of the time, especially when you enter this season of life we're both in, your circles are very small.
Very.
Most of us only have 1 or 2. We may know a lot of people, but that doesn't mean that there are circles. So, so understanding that circles are built one by one and not everyone has these large bandwidth of circles they're having to navigate. Most people have very small ones.
And that's okay.
Absolutely.
But we have to make connection.
Yes.
And I think that's what I know that's what Pastor Chad's goal is this summer. It's to give opportunity. And that's what he said. He said, you may walk away from the summer and not make one connection, but it's not because we didn't give you opportunity to do it.
That's right.
So I think taking these tools that you've given us, like today, asking the questions, leaning into those feelings. Why do I feel like if I put myself out there, I'll be rejected? Where does that come from? And then how do I deal with rejection? And then maybe if we need to go deeper, seeing somebody to talk through that, but then taking those steps, like you said, like a dog on a leash, become curious enough to say, okay, what if I did join that group this summer? For June and July, just give it a shot. Like you said, it's not a lifelong commitment. I'm joining a dinner club to go out with them once a month.
That's right. And you will never know how much other people need you. Because go back to that spirit versus flesh.
Yep.
If you look at it from a flesh perspective, it's all about you. But you're not even considering that there could be someone else in that group that needs you more than you need them.
That's so good.
You haven't even thought about it.
Yeah.
And so what if you looked at it that way? If someone in that dinner club could feel just like I feel, and me stepping into it could give them that.
Yep. And that's the one connection you need. You don't have to make a connection with all 12 in the group.
No,
just one.
Just one.
Yeah. That's so good.
Yeah.
Jenni, this has been so helpful, even to me. This has just been so good, so helpful.
I appreciate it.
And I really appreciate you just doing the research, getting it all on paper. It's a lot.
It's a heavy
This is
topic.
a lot. Yeah.
It's a tender topic too. It's a tender topic.
And it would take weeks to kind of maybe unfold that in a therapy session, what we just did. So thanks for that.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome.
Okay, fun last question. What is one of your favorite things? We talked about this. That needs to be our favorite things. It can be a book, a podcast, an activity, a restaurant, a food. What's one thing on your radar recently that you think needs to be on ours?
So I'm going to say it. I think I said something workout last time, but workout is my therapy.
Yes.
So I'm almost at my 100th class with Club Pilates.
Club Pilates. And it is in Point Clear, right?
It is.
Okay.
Yes. I love it. I joined, I think in November.
Okay.
And what I love about it is, and I was telling you this, is it's all ages. I mean, I'm in Pilates classes with women that are way older than me that are killing it.
Tell us about
At
that,
a
like
level-
80, 90-year-old that's in a
Yes.
class with you.
Oh yeah, and they'll go to 2 to 3 Pilates class a day, and they are strong as anything.
Oh my goodness.
And it's so inspiring.
Yeah.
That's what I love about the space is it's not this, we're trying to one up each other with weights. It's just this really welcoming. We're focusing on strength. We're focusing on, making our bodies as strong as they can be so they can help us in the next season. That's most of us. That's why we're there.
That's so good.
It's really
Shout out Club Pilates.
I love it so much.
Well, if somebody comes, they may see you there.
Yeah, they could. Yes. Say hi.
Who knows? Well, we mentioned several books today in the podcast that we will put in the show notes for everybody if they are curious to do some hard, heavy lifting on the back end. You're available for therapy sessions, but you fill up really quickly. So
I'm very full. I just moved my Thursdays to Fairhope.
okay.
So for the summer, I will be in Gulf Shores only one day a week.
Mhm.
So I'm not taking patients in Gulf Shores right now unless you're willing to come to Fairhope. If you are, I can make space for you. But just because of the summer, we kind of tweaked my schedule a little bit.
And we'll put a link for that for Jenni. So if you need family or child therapy, you're available.
Absolutely.
Again, but your schedule fills up really quickly. And so sometimes you might need a minute to just take a minute and say, okay, it may take a couple weeks to get in, but it's worth it to do the hard work.
Yes. And I always try to get in. And even if what I tell people too is I've had a lot of people reach out and they needed something that wasn't in my scope, I'm happy to get them to the therapist they need to be. So even if you're not sure, always reach out. It is a discipline of mine to call everyone back. So I will call you back and make sure you get to the person that you need to get to.
That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
You're so welcome.
Well, I know that this episode is going to be so helpful to you. Let me encourage you to share this with a friend. Like after you listen to it or watch it on YouTube, just hit that share button, share it with a friend who may need to hear about this. And then join us on Sunday mornings at 9 or 10:30 or at our Bay Minette campus. And let's explore this topic more together this next few weeks as we learn to find your people. God created you to live in community. He did not create you to live in isolation and live alone. He wants you to find those people. We're here to help you do that, to help you take those steps like Jenni taught us to. But you have to take those next steps. So join us on a Sunday, come in person, meet some people, meet a greeter at the door. Just take that one step. And then join us on May 18th for our Find Your People party. It's going to be really special. There's going to be lots of groups. I'm doing a birding group because I'm going to find some bird people. I'm going to do it. I love it. Determined. I have to keep putting it out there. We're going to find some birders. And Chad's doing I think a men's group where they cook briskets and stuff like that. And then they bring it together and share each other's recipes and say, this is what I did, just around common interests where you kind of find your people.
Yes.
And then go from there. So we're going to learn so much through this series. Thank you guys for tuning in today. And thank you for sharing, liking, and subscribing, all the things. We love you, Coastal. We'll see you right back here next Wednesday.
Thank you for listening to this week's Coastal Conversations podcast. All of today's references will be found in the show notes. Also, if you enjoyed listening, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. We'll see you at Coastal this Sunday as we pick the conversation up from here.